Amen. I titled tonight's message Uncommon. We'll be in John chapter 4, and it'll be familiar as we'll talk about the story, or not the story, but the historical account of the woman at the well and Jesus' encounter with this lady. You never know where God's going to use you and how He's going to use you. It's important that you are sensitive to the leading of the Spirit and be prepared to work in whatever way He would have you work. Now, whether that's just being an encouragement to someone, whether it's sharing the gospel message with someone, whether it's just maybe handing someone a cold drink that needs one, or somebody that's hungry and just needs a meal, it's important that we listen to what the Spirit tells us that we need to be doing. And we minister to people in so many different ways. And I want to relate to you something that took place over the weekend, or yesterday. We was at Pineville at the All-State tournament for our league of softball, and no, we weren't in it. We went and watched the championship game. And somebody just forgot to put us in it. I guess, no, not really. We just didn't make it this year, but that's all right. But Cheryl was nominated for second team All-State, and so we went so she could receive her award and be recognized, and that was a blessing. But as I come back in the dugout from them taking her picture on the field, the coach of the championship team quickly came up to me and put his hands on my shoulder. And this is not to say anything about me. This is to say to be ready to minister to anyone that around you that God puts in your way. He put his hands on my shoulders to stop me, and he whispered in my ear, he said, "Thank you so much for the conversation we had the other night. Iron sharpeneth iron, brother. It meant everything to me." You see, he texted me the other day, and he was distraught over some things that took place. I'm not going to get into it because it's not important, but what's important is that he sought some advice. Now, why he came to me, I don't know, but he came to me. And he texted me, I called and talked with him, and I told him what God put on my heart to tell him, and apparently it blessed him, and it helped him to make the decision he needed to make with the situation that was going on. And so that was a blessing I spend time coaching these young girls and never dreamed of touching the heart of another coach from another team that we've played, and we only got to play him one time this year, but being able to minister to him. So, and even beyond anything I dreamed or imagined as being a coach. And so that was exciting, and just a little bit later, another lady that I've come to know who coaches a team up in Shreveport, and I remember their first year playing, they were not so well, and their girls, they were struggling, and when we played them, we treated them with respect and with dignity and treated them like they were people. We didn't just go into the game and smash you and leave and say, "Oh, well, you should have been better." And since that first time we met, she and I kind of hit it off as coaches, and we talked quite a bit back and forth. And somewhere along the way, we developed a kinship and a friendship, and we coach similar ways in that we don't coach just the game. We coach beyond the game. We coach into life, because these girls are going to have to face life once they're done with school. They're going to be out in the real world, and if all they've ever learned was softball, then I failed as a coach, and she feels the same thing. And she won Coach of the Year, was nominated Coach of the Year by her fellow peer coaches. And she texted me a little bit later to thank me for my support and encouragement to her through the years. And that touched my heart again. So you never know who you're going to touch when God is having you minister to someone, when God's having you speak to someone, when God's having you be an encouragement, or when God's giving you something to tell somebody, or somebody comes to you for advice, and you may not have the words to say, and you're just like, "God, I need to know what you'd have me to say." And be sensitive to the leading of the Spirit. You don't know who you're going to touch. You never know what it's going to mean. And having those two things happen to me yesterday meant more to me than any other thing. It meant more to me than being in a tournament. That meant more to me than my team having an opportunity to win a championship trophy, because we've touched people's lives. That meant much more than a moment in softball. So what has that got to do with the message today? Because I'm going to tell you about a man who met a woman, and the message meant more to her than just that moment of water that she needed. Amen. Well, you know the story, or you should know the story, the woman at the well. And of course, our characters, you have Jesus who is the message, who is the message. You have the disciples, or those who knew the message, and they were considered the clean. They knew the message. They knew the message well. They walked with Him daily. They communed with the message. They knew the message, so they thought it like the back of their hand. And then there was the Samaritan woman, the one who was going to receive the message, the one considered unclean, the one that even our own people didn't want anything to do with. Now, you know the history between the Samaritans and the Jews. The Samaritans were seen as mongrels. That's the people that were worse than dogs. The Jews wanted nothing to do with them. But understand that Jacob had given the land of Sychar in Samaria to Joseph, and so Jacob was both of this people's forefathers. So there was kindred there, but yet they hated one another. The Samaritans had a place of worship in Mount Gerizim, and the Jews worshipped in Jerusalem, and there was a battle over where the right place to worship was. The Jews said you had to worship in Jerusalem, and the Samaritans felt that they could worship in Mount Gerizim at their temple. Another thing to understand is that many, if not almost every time, the Jews, when they traveled from Judea to Galilee, they would take an extra day or two out of their journey to go around Samaria. Though the shortest path would take you right through it, they would go around, even crossing the river and coming back so they wouldn't step foot in Samaria. This was a hated people. People they despised. People dare say that they did not want to bring the message of Jesus to. And I imagine it puzzled the disciples as Jesus took them through Samaria. And that pick up in verse number 4. John chapter 4, verse 4. It says, and He, and that's Jesus, He must needs go through Samaria. And it's important to understand that this was a need that Jesus had. This was not just a hunch. This was not, just happen chance I'm going to go this way. This was a way that He was going to go. It was an uncommon way. It was an uncommon way that He was going to go, but yet He needed to go. And I want you to think about in your life how many times you travel to work or you travel to the grocery store and you take the same way, but at some point the Spirit puts in you that you need to go a different direction. Or maybe you're walking down an aisle and you need to go to a certain point, and for whatever reason the Spirit puts in your heart that you need to take a different direction. Something uncommon. Dwell on that for a moment. And the Bible says, then cometh he to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near the parcel of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. And understand this was an uncommon place. So we had an uncommon way and an uncommon place for a message that needed to be said, and understand it's going to be an uncommon message. The Bible tells us now Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, therefore, being wearied with His journey, sat thus on the well, and it was about the 6th hour, or about noontime, which was an uncommon time to be at the well. So I have an uncommon way, an uncommon place, and now an uncommon time. This had to baffle the disciples of what was going on. And as He sat down, tired from the journey, the sun beaten down, His disciples take off to go into town to get some meat. As it was lunchtime, to get meal, they were hungry. They take off to go to town, and Jesus sits at the well. And this is where He must needs be, because He knew there was a message that had to be delivered. The Bible tells us there cometh a woman of Samaria to draw water, and Jesus said unto her, give me to drink. Now here's a woman rejected of her own people or despised by her own people, coming to a well at an uncommon time because of an uncommon life that she led. And Jesus gives her an uncommon request. give me to drink. You say, well, why is that an uncommon request? Well, it tells us. Well, verse 8 tells us the disciples went to buy meat. Look at verse 9. He says, then saith the woman of Samaria unto him, how is it thou, being a Jew, askest drink of me, which am a woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans. And therefore we learn that it was an uncommon request that a Jew would ask a Samaritan woman for a drink, much less a woman of her lifestyle. But Jesus answered and said unto her, if thou knewest the gift of God, and who it is that saith to thee, give me to drink, thou wouldest have asked of him, and he would have given thee living water. It was an uncommon message that was just delivered to the woman. An uncommon request followed by an uncommon message. Lady, if you would know who's talking to you, you would ask me, and I would give you living water. So now I imagine there's several confused people as the disciples are confused and they're off on their way, and we got a woman who's confused and not understanding what's going on. But we got a God that's in control of the situation. He knows exactly what needs to happen. He knows exactly what needs to be said, and He's got the exact message for this woman in her hour of need. And the woman saith unto him, Sir, thou hast nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. From whence then hast thou living water? Art thou greater than our father Jacob? And it's interesting that she asked him that. Which gave us of the well, and drank thereof himself, and his children, and his cattle. She said, Are you greater than Jacob? And I imagine Jesus was thinking, yeah, I created Jacob. He could have easily said that. So, yeah, I knew Jacob before he was. Yeah, I'm greater than Jacob. But he let her go on. Jesus answered and said, Whoever drinks of this water is going to thirst again. But whosoever drinketh the water that I shall give him shall never thirst. But the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up into everlasting life. You see, Jesus had a message. And folks, as we go about our days and we go about our life, sometimes God tries to send us on a path that's unusual for us. And I think sometimes, or I feel sometimes, at least it is with me, that I fight too much against the going a different way than trying to go the way God is trying to send me. Ever feel that way? Am I alone in that? Sometimes it's different. God's trying to send you a different way, and you're like, God, no, that's not the way I go. That's not what I usually do, God. That's not what I usually wear. It's not what I usually say. Oh, Father, I don't usually talk to those people. God, I just don't usually do those things. And the whole time the Spirit said, yeah, but, I need you. You got a message. I need you to go that way. I have a reason for sending you where you're going. I heard an evangelist that was driving out and about, and he passed a home. And all of a sudden felt an urge to go to the store and buy a gallon of milk. He goes to the store and he gets that gallon of milk. And he goes back by the house he had just went by and felt the urge to stop. And he walked over to that house, and God was leading him to that house to bring that milk to the person in that house. You see, it was more about the milk. There was a person in that house that had been praying and saying, God, if you're real, send somebody here. Send somebody here to show me your need. And because a man listened to what the Spirit was doing, a person's life was saved. Not only physically, but spiritually. And I've heard stories over and over of different evangelists, different preachers, common people telling stories of how God spoke to them in their heart and tell them to do something they wouldn't normally do, and they'd gone and done it only to find out that God was working in somebody else's heart, and they got to lead them to Christ, or they kept them from taking their life. You see, folks, we truly are the hands and feet of Jesus. We truly are the ministers of the gospel. We're to get it out, and we're to tell others, show others. There's people who are lost and dying. There's people like this woman that are thirsty. And they're trying to fulfill a desire And they're only meeting that desire in the moment in the flesh, and it's not fulfilling their life. You see, the woman was going to get the water to take care of the need at the moment of the household as they needed water. But Jesus was about to fill her up with something that was going to last a lifetime. Nay, last eternity. It would last eternity. The woman saith unto him, Sir, thou hast nothing to draw with. This well is deep. Are you greater than our father? 11 and 12. Jesus answered and said unto her, Whosoever drinks this water is thirst again. But whosoever drinketh the water I shall give him shall never thirst. But the water that I shall give him shall be in the well, springing up into everlasting life. And the woman saith unto him, Sir, give me this water that I thirst not, neither come hither to draw. Now understand, this woman's still caught up in the physical. She's confused that a Jew would have something to do with her, that there was a Jew even at that time, that there was a Jew even in that place, if there was a Jew along that way that would even speak to her. She was still confused about what was going on. I mean, I wouldn't understand either if somebody came to me and said, I'm going to give you some water so you'll never thirst again. I've had Gatorade, and that lasts pretty good. I've had Powerade and all those other sports drinks, and they help pretty good, but you know what? It doesn't take long before I'm thirsty again. They even come out some new stuff called Liquid IV that's even better than all the other ones, and it truly is, and it'll revitalize you. And you're dehydrated, and you're in need. But it's not long before I'm thirsty again. And Jesus said, I'm going to give you something that you'll never thirst again. And then he tells her, Go call thy husband and come hither. And what an uncommon request. An uncommon request again. Go call thy husband. Of course, the woman answered and said, I have no husband. And Jesus said unto her, Thou hast well said, I have no husband. For thou hast had 5 husbands, and he whom thou hast now is not thy husband, and that sayest thou truly. Wow, my tongue getting tied. And the woman saith unto him, Sir, I perceive that thou art a prophet. Things are starting to look up. She's starting to figure things out a little bit. Saying, Sir, something about you that's different. You just knew that my situation. You knew what was going on in my life, and it's the wonderful thing about God is He knows about what's going on in our life, and about the folks around us. He knows what's going on in their lives, and He knows who's to send where, at what time, to meet the need that they have. And I think about folks as we go out into our neighborhoods and we're faithful to go pray, and we're faithful to go out and meet, and sometimes it's to hand out a flyer, sometimes it's to hand out a Bible, but it's to say, come. I want to give you something so that you won't thirst anymore. And the more we go and the more we're faithful to minister, God is meeting their needs. And we're seeing folks come in. Well, God's getting ready to do the same thing through a woman as He's ministering to her. She said, Our fathers worship in this mountain. You say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship. Jesus said unto her, Woman, believe me, the hour cometh when you shall neither in this mountain nor yet at Jerusalem worship the Father. You worship, you know not what? We have what we worship. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. But the hour cometh, and now is, when the true worshiper shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth. The Father seeketh such to worship Him. God is a spirit, and they that worship Him must worship in spirit and truth. And He's given the message. He said, you go worship, but you don't know what you're worshiping. We know what we're worshiping, but there's coming a time where you don't have to go into the temple to worship. You're going to be able to worship in spirit and truth. You're going to be able to worship God where you're at. It's not going to be about where you go worship. It's going to be about who you worship. It's going to be about who your relationship is. It's going to be about who you know. Never heard the saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know? I had something happen the other day, and I made that same, I don't remember what it was, but I made that same, I said, it's not what you know, it's who you know. That's what it is with heaven. It's not necessarily what you know, it's who you know. You know Jesus. You believe in Jesus. You trusting in Jesus. It's who you know. And that's what Jesus was telling her. It's not about where you're going to worship. It's who you know. You're going to worship in spirit and you're going to worship in truth. He's about to lay the truth on her. The woman said unto him, I know the Messiah cometh, which is called Christ. When he is come, he will tell us all things. You know, this is what's interesting. Here's a woman that has heard about God all her life. She was familiar with God, but had no relationship. She was locked up and doing works. Now, I don't know how much she worked. I don't know how much she actually went to the temple at Mount Jezreel to go worship. She knew where it was. She knew what she was supposed to do. Well, it's like a lot of religious people I know. There's a lot of people that come sit in church. They know about Jesus, but they don't know Jesus. They understand that there's a God, but they don't know him. It's all about works, and that's what this woman was wrapped up in. She was wrapped up in her works. So much so that it has left her empty. It's left her empty as she was been with man after man after man and husband after husband after husband, and the one she was with now wasn't her husband, and don't know what took place in her life and why that path she went down, why she went down that path. We don't know exactly what took place. But she was struggling. And she was trying to work the best she could. She was trying to get to heaven the best way she could. And unfortunately, it was no good because she didn't know the Messiah. And Jesus said unto her, I that speak unto thee am he. And in those words, that woman's life was changed. You see, her sin had been confronted. He told her everything that was wrong with her. And she understood that he was a prophet. And she knew there was a Messiah coming. I think when he said, I am he, it clicked for her. And she said, I believe. It's not written right there. It doesn't say there, but I can read in between the lines. And at that moment, that lady said, I believe. He said, how do you know she believed? By her actions, what took place. You see, once she got done with that, once she got done speaking with Jesus, she took off and she left her water pots. She left her works behind. She went into town to tell the others that the Messiah is out here. Come and meet the man that told me everything wrong about me. She came to Jesus as Jesus came to her. You know, folks, we got a message, and, you know, that's a transformed life. Don't you understand that there's oftentimes God calls you the uncommon way? Too many times we want to focus on our comfort zone. We want to focus on the way we always did it. Or that's what we used to do. And we don't want to step out of the boat, and we don't want to try to walk on the water when God's calling us to walk on the water. And we're wondering why we're not reaching more people, and we wonder why not many people are coming to know Jesus Christ. It's because we're too busy in our comfort zone. We're too busy trying to make sure that we're okay, that we feel good, that everything's all right with us. We're going into the market and we're buying meat, and we're coming back, and we're not telling anybody anything about nothing, and they're not having anything changed in their life. And there's going to be one woman who in the religious people's eyes are worthless. She's going to hear the message, and she's going to come to know Christ, and she's going to go to those same people, that same town, and deliver a message, and people are going to come to know Christ. They're going to come because she was changed. And I want to know why a bunch of disciples went into town and nobody was changed. He said, well, they were commanded not to preach in Samaria. Okay, yeah, they were commanded not to preach in Samaria. I'll give you that. But why was nobody changed when those 12 men went in there to buy meat? I get to thinking about my own lives and the times I go to my common places. How many people's lives are changed because of what I've done? How many people's lives are changed by where I've walked? Have I given the uncommon message? Oh, folks are quick to talk about politics, and folks are quick to talk about sports, and you know I'm a sucker for sports. Folks are quick to talk about the weather, but you bring up Jesus. Ooh, all of a sudden, things get a little hairy. You can bring up God, and people will even talk about God, but for some reason, when you say Jesus, well, that gets personal. You see, God is big and ambiguous, and you just say God, and that means so many different things to so many people. But when you put in there Jesus Christ, oh, that only means one. There's only one person that refers to, and that can't be mixed up with anybody. But you know, he said, I am the way, the truth, as we talked about this morning. He is the only way to heaven. If people are ever going to see God, they're going to have to come to Jesus. They're going to have to come to Jesus. They're going to have to do like this woman and realize everything about her, all her sin. You know, she didn't make excuses. She said, wow, you're a prophet. I'd like to know some more of that conversation. I'd like to know when you said, I'm he, did she say, oh, forgive me? Forgive me. I believe. She had to have. She took off in town telling others. How many lives have we changed by how we live? Where do we fit in? Do we fit in the common with the religious people, the 12 that went in the market? Or do we fit in with the woman who was saved and went and told everybody? Where's it at? You know, that's why I started the message tonight with the two coaches that talked about how encouraging I was to them. I just ministered to needs. Brother, do you do that all the time? I wish I did it more. I wish I did it more, but sometimes I just go into the market to buy meat. And I miss opportunities. And I know we miss opportunities. I'm here tonight to encourage you to look for those opportunities. They're out there. They're out there in the uncommon places. And they're out there in the common places too. But you want to do a work, you want to see God move, go to where you're not comfortable. And that way, it's got to be God that does it. It's got to be God that speaks. It's got to be God that works through you. Go tell someone about Jesus.